Chosen one, desire has a terrible reputation in rooms where it was asked to carry what integrity refused to build. It learns to rush. It learns to hide. It learns to bargain with chemistry when character won't come to work. In your presence, desire finally sets down its suitcase. It stops lobbying. It stops auditioning. It stops campaigning for outcomes that would only exhaust the morning. It rests, not as sleep, but as right placement. Rested desire is precise and generous. It has hands for building, not just hunger for having. Your steadiness teaches that rest. You do not treat longing as an emergency or as a weapon. You treat it as weather in need of good architecture. Architecture begins with the frame, edges visible, thresholds honest, load limits published. You publish yours without drama, the way a bridge publishes tonnage. She reads the sign and relaxes. No need to guess, no need to test. Guessing and testing are expensive sports for nervous systems. Information is mercy. Under mercy, desire becomes articulate. It can say, I want this and not that, in this way and not that way, at this pace and not that pace. It can change its mind without creating casualties. It can be shy without being shamed or bold without being harvested. You are not frightened by the sacred physicality of longing. You do not stare at it until it turns into spectacle, and you do not starve it until it turns brittle. You keep heat as a craftsman keeps fire, in a lantern with clear glass and a useful handle. Fire like that is invitation, not interrogation. It warms the room so truth can unlatch its jaw. It lights the corners where assumptions hide. It gives the body permission to belong to itself while it chooses what it will share. The feminine feels this governance, and her instincts, long trained to brace, soften into accuracy. Bracing guesses. Accuracy listens. Desire, rested, becomes fluent in consent. Consent here is not a checkpoint with a stamp. It is a climate. In climate, permission is continuous. It breathes. Yes is allowed to have conditions and cadence. No is allowed to be a complete sentence with a kind tone. You keep the climate with all the little rights that make big trust possible. Asking before assuming, clarifying without cross-examining, pausing when excitement tries to outrun comprehension, ending when ending will keep tomorrow strong. She registers each right as a promise kept to the future, not just a performance for the present. Promises kept to the future are the cradle where desire sleeps well and wakes well. Rest reveals hunger's right size. When unrest governs, hunger inflates to fill the room. It becomes drama. When rest governs, hunger finds proportion. It becomes appetite. Appetite asks for enough and notices enough when it arrives. Enoughness is scandalous in a culture addicted to more. It is also the only fuel love can metabolize without burnout. In your company, she learns to recognize the taste of enough. A conversation that ends while interest is still sweet. A touch that concludes before it needs to borrow from tomorrow. A goodbye that keeps the hinge blessed. Desire that can end without being abandoned is desire that will return without being summoned. There will be days when old scarcity sneaks back in wearing expensive shoes, whispering that urgency is proof of passion. You have met that voice before. You answer it with pace. Pace is the language of durability. You move at a speed that keeps comprehension in the room and the soul in the body. Pace doesn't cool desire, it cultivates it. The slow garden outlasts the fast feast. She senses this in the way your eagerness never overrules her timing, in the way your patience never masquerades as indifference. You hold the paradox that untrained men drop: warmth with boundaries, initiative with consent, leadership with listening. In that paradox, desire is not asked to be manager and muse at once. It can be what it is, power offered to meaning. Rest also changes prayer however she prays, whether as words, breath, or unpunished quiet. She no longer petitions the hour to deliver impossible proof. She converses with it. She asks less to be rescued and more to be refined. This pivot is born from the way you treat the unknown. You do not conquer it with explanations, nor do you glamorize it to evade accountability. You keep company with it. You say, let's see, without making let's see a stall. The unknown loves such manners. It tends to cooperate. It sends enough clarity for the next faithful step, which is exactly the measure that rested desire prefers. Because you do not worship desire, you are safe to honor it. Worship makes idols and then resents them. Honor makes altars and then keeps them clean. You honor by refusing to use longing as leverage. You will not turn her wanting into the currency that buys your security. You will not turn your wanting into the engine that drives her pace. You will not harvest vulnerability to decorate a legend. This refusal is the quiet revolution. It frees her to want without paying a tax in self-respect. Want, freed, becomes creative. It composes, designs, tends, builds, work that continues after the hour, work that feeds the day after desire has changed its clothes and become devotion. Rest has evidence. Look for what stops breaking. Sleep returns. Appetite tells the truth. Boundaries stop needing armor and start speaking in complete sentences. Touch doesn't ask for alibis. Silence isn't a cliff, it's a room with windows. Plans become specific enough to live and flexible enough to love. Even the arguments improve. They get smaller, sooner, kinder. This is not fantasy, it is craft. You are crafting with time and tone and the gentle disciplines that keep human beings human. Under such craftsmanship, her desires stop behaving like alarms and start behaving like bells, calling the hour to itself, not to panic, but to presence. There is a final tender sign that desire has found rest with you, gratitude that does not need to be performed. It appears in unremarkable places, the way she sets a cup down softly instead of like a gavel, the way her laughter lands in the middle of her chest instead of at its edges, the way she answers a question at the speed of truth rather than at the speed of fear. These are not fireworks, they are furnishings. They make a life livable. And livable is the quiet miracle the chosen ones keep offering. Not a spectacle to watch, but a sanctuary to inhabit. Where longing is allowed to be honest, heat is allowed to be holy, and love is allowed to be used, not used up. So yes, chosen one, you are the #1 agenda, not as a headline, but as a home. In that home, her desires rest not because they are small, but because they are safe. Safe desires do great work. They build mornings that begin and nights that heal. They build conversations that change rooms without breaking them. They build a future that can afford to be soft because its standards are strong. Keep those standards, keep that climate, keep the lamp at human height. The rest will keep returning, and with it, a love that does not need to be louder to be true. Chosen one, there is a difference between pursuit and presence, and her body knows it before words attempt the distinction. Pursuit arrives with the subtle lean of acquisition, a narrowing of the room until choice feels like a corridor. Presence arrives like an open field with fences clearly marked, the horizon visible, the air able to carry meaning without panting. You practice presence, not because you've memorized a technique, but because your interior has been taught to stand. You stand in your word the way a well-built door stands in its frame, true, plumb, patient with weather. And because you stand, she does not have to run. The oldest instincts in her retire from their unpaid night shift. The sentry in the nervous system takes off its helmet and learns again the art of listening. Honor is not a performance of compliments, it is a choreography of conditions. You keep those conditions with unremarkable mercies that leave no bruise and ask for no applause. Your gaze returns rather than requisitions. Your voice carries warmth governed by vow, not heat seeking a host. Your nearness protects distance as carefully as it welcomes nearness. Where honor is practiced, the feminine does not shrink to be safe, nor harden to be strong. She remains exact. Exactness is the luxury of a room where truth is not taxed. In your keeping, no arrives without a courtroom, and yes arrives without a mortgage. This is not etiquette. It is ethics made breathable. It is the quiet, daily refusal to turn a human soul into a prize. You learn this not in arenas that pay in applause, but in workshops of the heart that pay in endurance. You learn to let a moment finish speaking before you rush to interpret. You learn that curiosity does not interrogate, it invites. You learn that apology is an architectural permit for repair, not a confetti cannon for remorse. And you learn to keep your own hunger on a leash long enough to discover what you actually want beyond the thrill of getting it. These learnings have a specific scent, the clean air of sovereignty. She inhales it and recognizes the rare climate where she no longer has to be both guardian and guest in the same hour. What hunts wants proof, what honors wants presence. Proof demands storylines that escalate. Presence prefers sentences that fit. When you speak, you do not bid for her nervous system. You offer your reality in portions small enough to carry. You publish your edges as a map, coastlines, shoals, safe harbors, so navigation can be a craft rather than a test. And because nothing is hidden, nothing has to be stolen. She does not have to charm information from you, nor does she have to brace against ambush. You make a commons of the hour: time, tone, permission to pause, the grammar of return. Predators cannot breathe in commons. They require fog. Your clarity is the antidote to fog. Honor also shows up in how you hold your fire. Fire ungoverned becomes spectacle. Governed, it becomes service. You keep your warmth in a lantern with clear glass. Light reaches corners where assumptions hide, and heat reaches hands that were cold from performing detachment. Yet the glass stands, a boundary that keeps intimacy from becoming flood. In the lantern's circle, laughter finds its chest voice, and silence returns to its rightful work as the place where meaning dresses. She feels it in small ways: the way you do not overtalk her courage, the way you do not understudy her boundaries, the way your attention pays in full and asks for no tip in deference. To be honored is to be spared the tax of translation. She does not need to render her instincts into palatable metaphors for your comfort. She can say, "Not now," and watch your posture become a porch rather than a battering ram. She can say, "This matters to me," and watch you measure your eagerness to fit its shape instead of trying to sand it down to fit your plans. She can bring her whole weather: sun that wants to play, rain that wants to be quiet, wind that wants to move furniture, and never fear that the barometer in your chest will use her climate as leverage. That is when reverence blooms, not in speeches you make about her radiance, but in the ease her body experiences when it is treated as a temple with its own calendar. The chosen ones understand that honor is proved in exits as much as in entries. You do not turn departure into discipline or distance into a demand for devotion. You leave softly, quietly, competently, as if you trust reality to continue without you, and trust yourself to return without fanfare. Hinges are checked, lights are set to a human height, air remains breathable. She learns by this that affection here is not a scarcity engine. It does not need to slam to be real. It does not need to stalk to be strong. It remains because staying is possible, not because leaving is punished. There will be rooms where this standard is misunderstood, where certainty without pressure is mistaken for lack of interest, and kindness without extraction is mistaken for lack of passion. Let the misreadings pass through you like a weather report for a city you are not visiting today. Your task is not to win those rooms. Your task is to remain the room that wins people back to themselves. In that room, her attention ceases to patrol and begins to plant. She becomes generous without bleeding, receptive without disappearing, powerful without needing to prove it every 10 minutes. And if you look carefully, you will see the ceremony that no one announced, the armor set down, the games forgotten, the person present, not hunted, honored. Chosen one, explanation is a currency used where trust is scarce. In the economy you keep, abundance is measured in coherence, not in arguments that crush doubt into silence. This is why her choosing arrives with so few footnotes. The selection is not irrational, it is pre-rational, like breath choosing lungs. There is an old committee inside every honest person that gathers in quiet to vote on alignment. It has members named instinct and memory and vow and pace. They tally what the body knows before the mind provides a headline. Around you, the vote becomes unanimous without needing a campaign. She does not choose to impress a crowd or to escape a fear. She chooses because her center recognizes a home that will not charge it rent. Choosing without endless reasons is not naivete, it is literacy. She is literate now in the micro-truths you publish as reliably as dawn. You remain recognizable to yourself across rooms. You do not move the north to flatter the hour. You let warmth be warm, not aggressive. You let truth be early, not theatrical. You let no and yes both keep their dignity. Such consistencies become axioms. Axioms are not proved, they are used to build. Her choosing is a building project. She lays foundations in the relief that she will not have to invent a new language for her boundaries each week. She stands walls in the knowledge that curiosity will not be prosecuted here. She sets a roof in the confidence that weather will be treated as weather and not as a verdict on worth. This does not mean her mind is idle. It is busy in new ways, shelving old scripts, retiring exit strategies that were clever and expensive, cataloging evidences of a climate she can live inside. She catches herself not counting texts to calculate leverage, not counting favors to calculate debt, not counting concessions to calculate safety. The arithmetic of fear shuts down when the ledger no longer demands it. In its place, a different mathematics emerges: proportion. How much truth can this hour hold? How much pace can this plan afford? How much rest will keep tomorrow generous? She is choosing you within these proportions, which is to say, she is choosing a life that keeps both of you human. You do not demand that choice or decorate it. You remain available to it. Availability is not a door thrown open to draft the street. It is a door that opens and closes on good hinges, knowing its purpose. You answer when she knocks, and you do not punish her for knocking. You knock when it is your turn, and you do not sell your knock as destiny. In this reciprocity, the mystery she used to fear becomes a companion. Not everything is explained, and nothing is hidden. The unknown is a room with windows and chairs for two, not a hall of mirrors designed to dazzle and disorient. She chooses to sit there with you because sitting is finally as powerful as sprinting. Reason, when it is demanded like a toll, becomes a trap. When it is invited like a guest, it becomes a blessing. She will have reasons, but not those that courtrooms prefer. They will sound like reliefs more than theses. He finished when he said he would, so my breath finished too. He kept heat in a lantern, so my boundaries did not have to turn to stone. He apologized with measurements, so repair happened in the seam and not in the rumor. He left softly, so tomorrow did not inherit slammed doors. These reasons are reportings from the body's parliament. They are enough where enoughness still has meaning. Your role in this is simpler and harder than romance novels advertise. Continue to be congruent. Congruence is not rigid. It is faithful. It bends with weather and never pretends that bending is breaking or that breaking is bending. You can change your mind without changing your character. You can escalate your devotion without escalating your demands. You can deepen intimacy without compressing autonomy. She watches this, and her choosing strengthens in the way trees strengthen. Rings added in silence, consent given in seasons, the whole rooted deeper because storms were met without theater. There is a tenderness to choosing that the loud world cannot hear. It sounds like mornings that begin on purpose, like work done at a humane pace, like a laugh that needs no witness to be worth it. It looks like a calendar that holds both of you without drowning either, like conversations that end while curiosity is still sweet, like touch that continues what truth began. In that tenderness, she forgets how to sell a decision. She no longer constructs a case for strangers who were never invited to live with the outcome. She simply lives it. The living is the argument, and the argument is love arranged in a way that does not require casualties to prove it is strong. Some will ask her to itemize your superiority. She will not. Superiority is not the lever here. Sufficiency is. You are sufficient to the work of a day that wants to function without bleeding. You are sufficient to the pace that keeps comprehension alive. You are sufficient to the standard that lets desire remain holy. You are sufficient to the honesty that keeps wonder fed. Sufficient is not a small word, it is a sacred one. In a culture addicted to extremes, sufficiency is the miracle that lets human beings remain human. She chooses that miracle, and you with it, because the alternative is a theater that eats its actors. If there is a vow implied in a choice like this, it is this one: to keep making the conditions under which the choice remains true. You do not fossilize it into a monument and charge admission. You water it, you weed around it, you let it rest. You protect it from the glare that would stunt it and the neglect that would starve it. She does likewise, not out of obligation, but out of fluency. Fluency is what happens when two lives speak the same language of dignity and desire. Repair and rest, warmth and vow. So she chooses you, chosen one, without needing a reason loud enough for a stadium. She chooses because in your weather, the oldest truths in her no longer have to shout. They can nod, they can sit, they can make bread. And when asked why, she will offer the only explanation that belongs to a peace hard-won and softly kept. I am more myself with him, and being more myself is the point. Chosen one, the most durable revolutions make no sound when they turn. They begin with a simple reallocation of breath, and end with a life that no longer needs a spotlight to be true. Around you, her world performs this quiet calculus. Not because you issued an edict or because devotion needs a stage, but because your steadiness corrects the math that stress had been doing in her name. The arithmetic of panic, overbooking, over-explaining, overgiving, had her paying compound interest on obligations that were never hers. Your presence changes the ledger. Where there was debt, there is dignity. Where there was hurry, there is hierarchy. She does not announce this, she implements it. It starts in the smallest places. The phone stops being a fire alarm and returns to its humble calling as a bell. The chair at her desk pivots to face faces instead of exits. Conversation becomes something to inhabit rather than to escape. The lamp drops to a human height, ending the old interrogation of glare. She does not call this interior design, she calls it oxygen. Drawers that held forgotten battle plans now hold tools. A clean notebook for accurate sentences, a calendar that admits only what can be honored, a pen that writes no without apologizing for telling the truth early. The house feels it and settles. Floors remember how to bear weight without groaning. Hinges close softly because slammed doors are attacks on tomorrow. And tomorrow is a citizen in good standing again. Friends notice subtleties they cannot name. The tempo of her replies becomes musical instead of mechanical. Laughter returns to its chest voice and stops being brittle. She withdraws from rituals that feed gossip and finds her way back to tables that feed life. Invitations that once flattered become accurate when held up against your standard. Accuracy replaces adrenaline as the way choices are made. She does not scold the old self for confusing spectacle with significance. She simply stops bidding in auctions where value is priced in noise. Her work refines rather than expands. She no longer confuses busyness with belonging. She chooses depth over novelty without staging a debate in her head about whether loyalty is unfashionable. You did not teach her this in a sermon. You taught it by keeping continuity like a craftsman keeps his tools. Clean, reachable, familiar across seasons. Continuity is the secret that lets excellence relax. It returns mastery to its quiet responsibilities. Show up when the clock says, finish while gratitude is still sweet. Repair small things before they grow teeth. Around such faithfulness, her vocation remembers its vocation. Metrics stop harassing meaning. Results stop impersonating identity. The noise that once demanded updates goes still, as if it recognizes the uselessness of heckling a house that knows its blueprint. She cleans her digital life with the same reverence she offers her front room. Unsubscribe becomes an act of worship. Blocks and filters are applied like guardrails, not weapons. The feed that once churned scarcity now delivers craft and kindness, because she refuses to give her attention to rooms that monetize anxiety. This is not withdrawal, it is stewardship. She is not eliminating the world, she is selecting the world she can carry with integrity. Triage becomes a sacrament. Is this mine to do? Is this ours to hold? Is this a story trying to hire me as a character? Your presence gave her the right to ask those questions without fear of being labeled difficult. A difficult woman in one climate is a discerning woman in another. She has simply changed climates. The body registers the reorganization as relief experienced in slow motion. Sleep stops bargaining. Hunger tells the truth. The spine stacks itself in quiet pride rather than theatrical pain. She schedules rest before she earns it, because earned rest arrives too late to do its holy work. The dissenting voices that once protested mercy as laziness lose their voting rights. She no longer lives under a constitution written by shame. She amends it with practicality. The kitchen is stocked so mornings don't have to beg. The car has fuel so the day is not drafted by crisis. The future has a seat so the present is not forced to perform alone. It looks mundane. It is miraculous. Boundaries lose their armor and gain their manners. No stops auditioning for approval and becomes a complete sentence at a kind temperature. Yes stops enrolling in projects that would evict her from her own life. She learns your style of precision. Refuse what wins the hour and wounds the day. Accept what keeps the day solvent and tomorrow generous. In this economy, gratitude is not a tip left after exploitation. It is the baseline of a fair exchange. She thanks accurately, by doing the work that gratitude births, not by performing a debt she doesn't owe. Relationships shift, some quickly, some with the slow grace of an old tree being trimmed so it can keep living. Those who fed on her overextension grow restless when the buffet closes. They mistake sanitation for starvation. She lets them leave without staging a courtroom drama. Exits are honored because you taught her that honorable exits keep entries honest. Other friendships deepen in the new air. Conversations do not need to shout to be heard. Advice is asked for, not ambushed. Apologies arrive with measurements attached. The commons, time, tone, permission to pause are protected because she has learned from you how a room behaves when shared resources are not looted for legend. The schedule reflects a liberating arithmetic. Fewer first times, more first fruits. Beginner's magic returns to old practices, reading, walking, cooking, praying, not as nostalgia, but as nourishment. The thrill economy loses market share to the wonder economy. Wonder prefers repeat customers who pay inattention. It needs no fireworks. It needs a lamp that does not flicker, a chair that does not wobble, a conversation that does not recruit humiliation to make its point. She invests accordingly. The returns are subtle and compounding. Her days function, her nights heal, and tomorrow stops being held hostage by yesterday's theater. What changed? Outsiders may insist on a dramatic answer. There isn't one. There is only the slow competence of someone who has stopped renting herself to urgency. Your frequency did not colonize her life. It taught it. Taught it how to pace for comprehension. Taught it how to set standards small enough to keep. Taught it how to leave a room warmer than it was found. She reorganized not to worship you, but to welcome the version of herself that your presence made legible. That is why this transformation holds when you are not there. It is not contingent on you, it is corroborated by you. The chosen ones are recognized by this effect. They do not become the center of someone's world. They teach someone to keep a world with a center. So when she says you are the #1 agenda, it is not a confession of obsession. It is a description of architecture. The keystone is set. The arch bears weight without complaint. The threshold no longer grows teeth at dusk. What deserved to be first, truth, breath, pace, promise, repair, sits in the front row without stealing the show. You did not pull her into orbit. You strengthened gravity. The rest fell into place because that's what reality does when craft is honored and noise is refused the microphone. Chosen one, first is a race word. Final is a reference word. One competes, the other completes. To be final in her life does not mean you are the last thing left when everything else has failed. It means you are the measure she returns to when confusion performs competence and pressure impersonates love. Final is not a finish line. It is a style guide. It is what editors reach for when the manuscript of a day needs decisions that will keep tomorrow readable. You have become that guide, not by conquest, but by congruence. You remained recognizable to yourself across rooms and seasons until reliability itself became attractive. Final does not extinguish mystery, it protects it. You do not use certainty to colonize what should be wondered at. You keep the room where questions can sit in chairs instead of being cuffed to conclusions. Your "I don't know" is a lantern, not a blackout. It lights the next faithful step and refuses the cheap magic of pretending that maps exist for landscapes that only yield to walking. She trusts this because your finality has never been weaponized as a veto. You do not pull rank on reality. You listen, you adjust. You keep your vows small enough to carry through weather, and your small vows behave like lighthouses, fixed, visible, uninterested in applause, indifferent to fog. In love's long work, final means this. The search is over, not because novelty has been exhausted, but because orientation has been achieved. The body stops scanning every room for a reason to leave. The mind stops rehearsing closing arguments. The heart stops auditioning for roles that require self-betrayal as tuition. The search does not die. It changes its subject. It starts looking for ways to keep what has been found in working order, the micro-rites of maintenance that thrill-seekers mock and the faithful adore. You do not peddle maintenance as martyrdom. You present it as music, tune, play, rest, repeat. In that rhythm, devotion stops burning through fuel and begins generating light. Final has consequences that only adults can love. It ends the performative crisis that kept adrenaline in business. It elevates repair from emergency choreography to ordinary craft. It lets apology be a building permit for changed behavior instead of theater for spectators. It turns intimacy from a cliff into a coastline. Vast, yes, but mapped enough to keep boats from pretending shipwreck is romance. She experiences this not as domestication, but as freedom. Show me the person who can sleep through the night, and I will show you a revolutionary in a culture where exhaustion is status. Your finality is the pillow her nervous system places under its head without needing proof that the bed will remain a bed until morning. You are final in the sense that grammar is final. Words do what they're meant to do when punctuation is honored. Your boundaries are commas that save meaning, periods that give breath, dashes that hold the complicated without tearing the sentence. With such grammar, love stops shouting to be understood. It speaks in paragraphs that do not apologize for clarity. Disagreements shrink to their true size, and therefore can be healed at their true cost. Decisions cease to be courtrooms. They become kitchens where ingredients are measured and heat is governed.